Hello everyone, and welcome to Cancer Scribblers. This is a pre-recorded video without an audience, coming to you on a very drizzly English Thursday afternoon, and trying to just keep it together because I am talking to myself, and last time I did this I was talking to a person, so it does feel quite strange. So going for informal and conversational and maybe not as polished as we need to be, let's face it. It's all good here. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and then let's get started. So here we go. If I just move myself, move that there. Okay, and hopefully that's all working. It's extensively tested so that I don't need to record it twice. So here's hoping this is a good first run through. So hi everybody, my name is Sam Rose. I am a published writer, a literary magazine editor, and a 3 times cancer survivor. I had bowel cancer in 2010 at the age of 22, and duodenal cancer and uterine cancer in 2018 at the age of 30, all caused by Lynch syndrome, which is a genetic condition that makes people more likely to get certain types of cancer. Earlier this year, I published my memoir, Gut Feelings, Coping with Cancer and Living with Lynch Syndrome. I also have an MA in creative writing, and I'm a PhD student researching the connection between creative writing and cancer survivorship issues, the emotional side of cancer survivorship, which is what brings me here to you today to talk about poetry and cancer. So here I've just realised you can see all of my tabs and everything, and hopefully there's nothing embarrassing there, and hopefully I'll be able to edit that out in post. If not, we'll just see how this goes. Okay, let's crack on. So session outcomes then. By the end of this session, you will be more familiar with poets who write about cancer. We're going to have a look at some examples and see what we like about them, why it works well, and yeah, learn about some more famous names. You'll begin to consider the form that your poetry might take. You'll have more clarity on which parts of your story you'd like to write about, from the small details to the whole big picture. You'll be more confident in analysing what makes a good poem when we have a look at these famous poets. You'll also be able to identify opportunities for sharing and publishing your writing online and in print. And I'm hoping that by the end you will feel inspired to go forth and write. So firstly, Len, let's start right at the beginning. Why poetry? Why are we interested in writing poetry? What's so great about it? I've often thought that poetry has a bit of a bad reputation, really, because a lot of people think that it's a bit old and stuffy and difficult to understand, and maybe it doesn't make any sense. And that's just not the case at all, as we know. If you write poetry already, which I'm guessing you might, because that's why you're here. So let's just have a little look then. So when I was putting these slides together, I wanted to have a little look and see what pictures I could put in my slides to make them look a little bit more attractive. And I went to my favorite picture website, Pixabay, and I just typed poetry into the search bar to see what would come up. And this is what came up. So as you can see, some of these pictures make perfect sense. You've got books, you've got a pen at the bottom there, you've got those little pages folded into a heart shape, which is quite cute. At the top there, you've got a little heart scribbled in a journal. Underneath that, you've got the rose pressed between the pages, which I think is quite nice metaphor for poetry, the beauty squished between the pages. Also, a lot of poetry is about nature, so that's quite fitting, really. So I think that's a really good depiction on its own of a good way to represent what poetry is. It can be nature, it's beautiful, very natural. What else have we got? We have a woman holding a coffee cup, and to be honest, I don't really know what she's doing here. I don't think she does either. We have a picture on the left there of a field with some snow, and it is a bit weird that came up as a result when I typed in poetry. It is a little bit strange, but also it's interesting, isn't it? Because that is, some people's idea of poetry is a really beautiful landscape, and poetry means different things to so many different people. And the same with beauty and attraction, and everything is very much open to interpretation, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and all that. So yeah, I always find that really interesting that picture in particular came up as poetry, but I can totally see myself writing a poem about that scene. I think it's a very literary scene. And then just underneath that, you've got this picture of open book with fields, and it looks like a stream of some kind in there, and that's just a really great representation of poetry and all writing and books, really, that there is a whole world just on a page. It really just opens up this whole new world to us as writers and also as readers. So I just wanted to throw that out there firstly as a visual representation of poetry and how it can mean different things to different people. Maybe the woman with the coffee cup is poetic. So I just thought that was interesting and wanted to put that out there first. So why poetry then? Continuation. So I wanted to put together some quotes about poetry to get us into the mood and to remind us why we do this, why we write poetry, and why we love it. So start with Plato then. Poetry is nearer to vital truth than history. So there's so much truth that you can tell with poetry. In one session, one of these sessions that I did with somebody, we were talking about how poetry is there's just so much that you can find out from it. When we're writing things, we can learn things that we didn't know before we started writing. We can learn things about ourselves. We can write something and think, oh, I didn't realize that I felt that way before I started writing. So yeah, it's often sort of based on our own experience. It's not always, and often, though not always, is often sort of non-fiction as well, though you can get kind of fiction in poetry. And yeah, it's just so true that poetry holds that truth there, that you can find as a writer and as a reader. Poetry might be defined as the clear expression of mixed feelings. That's again just going back to what I was just saying about finding out things that you didn't realize before, and using language to be able to convey those things to other people, maybe in ways that they've never read before. Always be a poet, even in prose, Charles Baudelaire. Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit later about the landscape in between poetry and prose, and how we can venture into both of those things, and how they really do overlap, because language can be poetic and feel poetic without the form that it's in actually being a poem. So there's a lot that can be said about poetry appearing in all sorts of different places, and not it's not just constrained to poetry. The true poem rests between the words. I think that has two meanings for me. I don't know what you kind of interpret from that, but for me, it's partly how we can get different meanings from poetry. You know, how it's all open to interpretation a lot of the time. Things will mean different things to different people, and we might gather meaning from beyond the words, and the words might take us somewhere completely new and unexpected. And then also thinking not about words but about the white spaces and how important white spaces and layout and form, and why do we put the line breaks where we put them. You know, why are some poems formatted into stanzas? Why are some you know, blocks of text like prose poetry? Why in some books are the margins so wide and large, and the piece of work sits perfectly central and tight? What effect does it give when there's a lot of white space before and after a word or a sentence or a paragraph or a poem? And finally, writing free verse is like playing tennis with the net down. Robert Frost. We are not polished here today at all. Writing free verse is like playing tennis with the net down. Absolutely. And you will see from the examples of different poems that I give, and through some of the other things that I talk about, that I really do lean towards free verse. And we'll talk about different other types of poetry as well, but I just love the freedom that free verse gives, when I'm not constrained by you know, syllable counts or stanzas, and you know, having to repeat things in a certain way, or you know, I just love being able to experiment and to live in the world of free verse, where things are very relaxed and open. But that's me. Okay, so we talked about why write poetry. So why write about cancer? And obviously you'll have your own ideas as to why you want to write about cancer, because that's, you know, why you're here. So there are some benefits of writing about cancer then. So for example, writing and sharing our poetry can benefit ourselves and other people. Excuse me. So it can be cathartic to write about our experiences, our illness experiences. It can benefit other people because they may be reading our work and think, oh yes, you know, that applies to me too. I feel that this person empathizes with me. I'm not alone, and that's wonderful. It can help people to feel heard and understood. So I realized quite a while ago, I'll tell you a story. Actually, I will veer off slightly and tell you the story. So when I was about 2 years after my first operation, my bowel operation, and sort of in the all clear and everything, it was all fine. I was really surprised at how much I was still struggling with the emotional side of cancer survivorship. You know, the fear of recurrence, general feelings of sadness about everything that had happened. You know, feeling like my body looks different now. I don't trust my body as much as I used to. I've been reminded of my mortality, and really, you know, difficult things to think about, and things that they don't really tell you that it's going to be like that afterwards. Especially back then in 2010, I found it was very much a surprise that these were issues like 2 years after, you know, having the all clear. So I wanted to reach out to somebody, especially because it felt a bit like people around me had moved on from it. You know, I was better, people were happy about that, and it did feel like I was the only one who remembered and was still thinking about it and dealing with it. It was like old news to everybody else, but it wasn't old news to me. And I just really wanted to feel heard and understood. And so I reached out to my my psychology teacher from sixth form, and I said to him, I messaged him on Facebook and I said, are you doing any sort of private practice work, could I come and talk to you? I sort of briefly explained this is what's happened to me, and he replied and said that he didn't practice, because I felt like I needed therapy or to talk to somebody, and I felt like that quite a lot on and off over the years, and I did eventually go and speak to somebody, but yeah, that's initially why I thought that I was contacting him, because I wanted counselling, and it wasn't until a long time afterwards that I realised that actually it wasn't just that I wanted. What I really wanted was, somebody who hadn't heard it before, somebody who would be as shocked as I still felt I was, somebody who it's not old news to, it's new news, and they sympathize, and they want to listen, and they're interested, and they care, and yeah, I didn't realize until a long time afterwards that actually really all I wanted from my old teacher was to feel heard and understood. But now I know that I get that I get that opportunity to talk about these things through my writing, which at the time I wasn't really doing any writing about cancer at all, and yeah, now I do feel more fulfilled because I'm doing all of this writing, like poetry and guest blog posts, and of course my PhD, all about this topic. So now I have that outlet. I don't feel the need to reach out to a random not random, but previous teacher, in order to feel understood and to feel heard. I feel heard now through my writing. So that's a roundabout way of saying that this is a great benefit that writing can give. It can also give us a sense of achievement, because we're creating something hopefully that we're proud of. We like creating this thing. Hopefully we'll feel proud of it by the end, especially if we're sharing it and we're getting positive feedback, or if we're publishing, then yeah, that can really be a sense of achievement. And of course, just finishing something as well is an absolute achievement in itself. You don't have to hunt down publication, I don't think, in order to feel that achievement. Just the very act of creating something positive out of a negative experience is a great thing. It can also help us to advocate for ourselves and others, and to talk about bigger issues, so and issues that aren't really talked about much in society and in the media, and even, to be honest, in a clinical setting. A lot of these emotional issues that I focus on aren't really talked about. The media talks a lot about awareness and prevention, and also portrays a cancer survivor or patient in a particular way, which may not reflect everybody's experiences. I know it often doesn't reflect my experiences. So writing gives us an opportunity to write our own stories with our own language, because again, just thinking about, for example, battle language, he lost the battle, that kind of thing, is often used in media and often doesn't resonate with people. So I think it's really important that we are able to tell our own stories with our own chosen words as well. Which, yeah, sort of covered there already. It helps us to raise awareness of overlooked issues. And of course, it can be fun, which is, even though it is, writing about cancer, and that's, very difficult, a heavy topic, it can also be very enjoyable. But self-care when writing about cancer, then I'm going to go through, because this is really important. So I first sort of came across this when I was reading about cancer online, and I realized that actually I should also apply it to writing about cancer. So firstly is to say that not everybody will benefit from writing about traumatic experiences, and some people will benefit more than others. I'm not going to pretend to know all of the ins and outs of will this help this person, will it help this person, because I don't know, and I can't, explicitly tell you. I think maybe only you can know if it's right for you and it's going to be helpful and be something that you want to do. And that may vary from day to day. Some days you're not going to want to face it, and some days you're got to feel strong enough to tackle whatever issues that you want to write about. It's all perfectly fine and normal. But things like if you have a lot of anxiety around writing, or also whether or not you're used to being open, or if you're somebody who tends to bottle things up more and maybe not write about them so much, these are all just sort of factors that mean that writing can benefit you more or less, or in different ways. Some ways of writing can be more beneficial. So James Penbaker did a lot of research around expressive writing, and expressive writing is when you sit down with your pen and your paper and you basically open the floodgates. It's a bit like free writing. You just sort of don't really think too much about what you're writing. You don't worry about spelling or grammar or anything like that, and you just just pour it out all out really, and that's expressive writing. And it's usually on a particular topic, potentially traumatic topic. So yeah, he was really a thought leader in his field, and so a lot of the stuff on this slide comes from him and his books. So he said that some ways of writing can be more beneficial. For example, when you openly acknowledge your emotions, that can help. When you construct a coherent story. So there's more research, I believe, by Danoff Berg, which looked at narrative writing. So narrative writing, or a coherent story, is kind of when you start at the beginning and you say, well, this happened to me, and then this happened, and this happened. It's kind of chronological, and it all and orderly, and it all makes sense. And Danoff Berg found that could be really beneficial, because it creates a sense of order in your mind. I don't know about you, but when I had all of my like tests and hospital appointments and things, everything kind of blurred into one and muddled together, and time wasn't really a thing anymore. But by writing my memoir, I can sort of see that coherent story in front of me, and that's helpful. And it can also help to sort of reduce, what's the word I'm looking for, not obstructive, not obtrusive, memories that just this is so bad, I can't remember the word. Intrusive memories, there we go. So because you're addressing things head on, in a very direct way, then that can reduce the amount of intrusive memories that come to you, because you are sort of addressing it more openly, potentially. Switching perspectives can also be helpful. So when I received the reply from my psychology teacher, which I wasn't overwhelmed with, back in 2012, this year, so many years later, I wrote myself the message that I would have wanted him to send to me at the time, which was a good exercise. So yeah, maybe switching perspectives, switching to your caregiver's perspective, or a medical professional, or the patient if you're a caregiver. That can all be interesting ways of looking at things. And also expressing yourself honestly by finding your own voice, so trying not to mimic other people's writing styles. It can all be helpful. The recency of trauma can impact whether or not writing about it is going to be beneficial. So if something occurred within the last few days, it might not be as beneficial to write about it now. Maybe wait a few weeks or months or something before you address it, and then you might see more of a benefit. there is a risk of analysing or ruminating too much, or telling the same stories without resolution if you're just kind of really fixed on one thing, and can't get sort of past it to a resolution, then that also might not be great. There is a risk of reading of someone reading your private writings, perhaps, or judging your writing or giving you negative feedback if you've shared writing with them, or perhaps just not receiving it in the way that you wanted them to receive it, which I guess is also true with publication. And then risk of negative feelings, of course, because we're dealing with, heavy things. There is obviously going to be a risk of, feeling sad or upset or overwhelmed or guilty or afraid, all sorts of things when we're writing about these things. And James Penbaker recognized that as a short-term risk, but also found that in the long term, expressive writing can still, have those long-term benefits, even though there are those short-term risks. So also, both writing and not writing about cancer can be a form of self-care. So writing about cancer can help, as we've just said, to organize your thoughts, to give you the benefit of writing something positive, and getting that positive thing out of a negative experience. And it can also provide a sense of closure for you, potentially. I keep saying potentially because absolutely nothing is guaranteed. However, writing about other things completely unrelated to cancer can still help us work through the cancer experience and all the emotions involved around that, because writing about other things can remind us of who else we are. Again, don't know about you, but just talking about my personal experiences, I struggle with identity, and who am I apart from a cancer survivor? I had my cancer, my first one, when I was 22, just sort of starting adulthood. Don't really know too much about what it's like being an adult who isn't a cancer survivor. So I guess that did happen at quite a formative time. And yeah, it's difficult to think about who else we are beyond these experiences sometimes, especially when we're juggling the cancer world, the medical world, with trying to lead a normal life and going to work. But then work is interrupted by appointments, and I can't go on this holiday because this has happened, or whatever. So I think cancer definitely does impact our identity sometimes, but writing about the other aspects of our lives can help us to reconnect with who else we are, what else we love, what else is going on around us. So my 2 top tips for self-care when writing about cancer: the first one is to take a break from writing about traumatic topics, whether that's taking a break from writing completely and going to do something else, or if it's writing about something unrelated to cancer, or writing about yourself, or just about something completely mundane or completely different. And then secondly is to be mindful of your feelings while writing. So as I started to say at the beginning of the first slide before I veered off, I first started thinking about like this mindfulness self-care issue when I was reading about cancer online. So reading other people's blog posts and forum posts and things like that, and you might start off just wanting to find something out, or just looking for something positive, and it might start out and you feel okay, but then you start reading more and more and you end up down this rabbit hole, and suddenly you're reading something incredibly sad or scary from somebody else, and you're thinking, oh gosh, what if that happens to me? And then I think that if you can be mindful, then your self-care can prevent you from getting that far. So if you just keep on checking in with yourself when you're reading and when you're writing, to think, am I still happy doing this? Is this still enjoyable? and useful for me? Do I still want to be doing this, or am I starting to spiral into like a black hole of sadness? Yeah, and then hopefully if you keep checking in with yourself, you think, oh, it's starting to get just a little bit overwhelming here. Let's just take a break. Let's just go do something else or write about something else. I think that could really be helpful. I know I do kind of do that a little bit self-consciously now, subconsciously rather. Yeah, I do find it useful. So let's have a look at some examples of some cancer poetry. So Julia Darling is one of my favorites. She was a northern writer, and I believe she had breast cancer, and she wrote a lot about it. She has some really great books of poetry, and this one is one of my favorites. I'm going to read it to you, and it's called Too Heavy. So, dear doctor, I'm writing to complain about these words you have given me that I carry in my bag: lymphatic, nodal, progressive, metastatic. They must be made of lead. I haul them everywhere. I've cricked my neck. I'm bent with the weight of them. Palliative, metabolic, recurrent. And when I get them out and put them on the table, they tick like bombs and overpower my own sweet-tasting words. Orange, bus, coffee, June. I've been leaving them crumpled up in pedal bins where they fester and complain. Diamorphine, biopsy, inflammatory. And then you say, where are your words, Mrs. Patient? What have you done with your words? Or worse, you give me that dewy look. Poor Mrs. Patient has lost all her words. But shush, don't upset her. I've got spares in the files. Thank God for the files. So I was wondering, dear doctor, if I could have a locker, my own locker with a key. I could collect them one at a time and lay them on a plate, morphine-based, diagnostically, with a garnish of lollipop, monkey, lip. This is just a great poem for so many reasons. And I firstly love just her playful tone. Her dear doctor, thank God for the files. Where are your words, Mrs. Patient? What have you done with your words? It's very, very playful, but also some really important messages, I think, because the medical words that we get are so heavy and difficult and confusing. And I think that for me, this is symbolic of how the medical world takes over our lives. Like we forget our own words: orange, bus, coffee, even just really, they're pleasant words, but they are mundane words, but they're everyday words, and they're words that belong to us in our lives. And then doctors come along and they have all of these medical words that just overpower everything. And I think it does. For me, it harks back to that kind of balance, trying to balance the medical and our lives and identities as well, as I discussed earlier. And I think also it shows the importance of being able to choose our own language and tell our stories in our own way, especially with the medical gaze upon us. And the medical words as well, they make me feel like I'm sort of something that needs to be fixed, so and more of a patient, and perhaps even an object, and less of a person, and less of like me. So there is an awful lot to take away from this. I'd be interested to hear what other people take away from it. And I just really love Julia Darling as well, because she's somebody who I look up to. So I find her really accessible, and I find that her style of writing isn't too dissimilar to mine. And I really like having somebody to look up to who I think, oh yeah, maybe I could, maybe I could be as successful as this writer one day, and as loved as this writer, because her way of writing doesn't feel out of reach for me. I don't look at her poems and think, oh my gosh, I'd never be able to write like that. I mean, I do look at her poems and think, oh my gosh, these are wonderful. I hope one day I'll be able to write. So is that kind of, oh, I have hope that I could write as well as this and be as successful as this, rather than, oh my gosh, there's no point even trying because I'm just not going to be this good. Sorry, I'm losing my voice because I came out of a meeting and went straight into recording this. so rarely happens because I really don't talk quite that much. So this second poem to have a look at then is called First Shower After Surgery by Kristen K. Brown. And I really like this one for its metaphorical properties. So let's have a look at this one. Metastasis sick, morphine dumb, this body is no longer mine. Cut hip to hip, the faucet turns and a frozen lake pools beneath my fingers, beneath my toes. Thin ice, thin stitch, give me the itch to fish of mend. Give me the washed out road of my spine, spiraling into a million sympathetic rivulets. What I wouldn't give for softer water. Year after year, calcium accumulates like small bones. It is so very nice to be pulled up to where the light lives. Begin with the tender neck, the delicate divot of a collarbone, and let this water wash away whatever it is that keeps the hurt from finding me. I breathe, I say, I am okay. Once a spring storm turned the basement into a moss-coloured sea, a flood knitting its brown curtain up to the basement door. I woke at midnight to find drawers of water carrying away the Christmas tree. I couldn't sleep, dreaming of ruin, nothing to do but wait for daylight, wait for the house to sort out its own inner destruction, hoping that there might still be some solid structure left when all of this is through. So I feel like she's using a metaphor here for of a flooded house to explain her body under the shower. We go from her being under the shower to this flooded house, and really it's the ending for me that sort of brings these things together. Wait for the house to sort out its own inner destruction, hoping that there might still be some solid structure left when all of this is through, hoping that there might be, you know, something left of the body of the person, you know, when all of the medical stuff is done. I really relate to that, and definitely think that that's something that makes a good poem is the metaphor, the relatability. Something else I love about this poem is the way that she uses indents. It just looks pretty, and I think also indents and white space can be used as punctuation, because I think it makes you read or recite the poem in a different way, like in the second column there in the second stanza, let this water wash away. I feel like I should naturally pause after water. I think that works really well, and the enjambment as well, so the continuation of an idea or a sentence from one stanza into the next. Yeah, I think that works really well. So this next one then is the fourth sign of the Zodiac by Mary Oliver, and it's from her collection Blue Horses. So I've put two poems in here, well, one and then a little bit of the next one. So I want to put On Not Mowing the Lawn here. I won't read it out because my voice is really going now. So On Not Mowing the Lawn, and this poem comes directly before the fourth sign of the Zodiac in her Blue Horses collection, and I just really wanted to show you, because On Not Mowing the Lawn is really representative of most of the poems that have come before in this collection. And as you can see, it's about the grass, it's about nature and birds, and yeah, quite peaceful and beautiful, really, and that's what a lot of the poems in this collection are like. And what I really like about Not Mowing the Lawn, it has its own great properties. The repetition of let at the beginning of nearly every line, and also at the end, let the noise of the mower be banished. Yes, yes, that kind of reinforced enthusiasm from the yes, yes. Yeah, I think that repetition works really well. So yeah, so in Blue Horses, Mary Oliver writes about nature, love, birds, peaceful feelings, as demonstrated in this first poem. And then let's have a look at this second poem then, or the first stanza of it, the fourth sign of the zodiac. Why should I have been surprised? Hunters walk the forest without a sound. The hunter strapped to his rifle, the fox on his feet of silk, the serpent on his empire of muscles, all move in a stillness, hungry, careful, intent, just as the cancer entered the forest of my body without a sound. And that threw me, even though I knew it was coming. I was like, yeah. So I find it a little bit jarring that cancer is introduced in this poem that starts off as nature, this whole collection that starts off about nature, and then here just sneaks in this mention of cancer, as it could be described as doing with our bodies, as she does describe it as doing with our bodies and with our lives. Yeah, so cancer is introduced within the context of all of these positive images, and it's a gentle introduction, but it's still startling and unexpected, and it makes me think about, where does your cancer experience sit alongside your everyday experiences, and again that balancing of these two worlds, and trying to live in both, and how these positive and negative things are interwoven. They don't happen in isolation, and I'm finding that with my own writing as well, that there are positive things and negative things. Even during a cancer experience, there are some specks of light, there is some positivity, and yeah, our writing can really reflect that if we want it to. It can talk about these negative things in a standalone way, or really weave them in, as Mary Oliver has done with these themes of nature. So yeah, so that's the main reason why I chose that poem, because it's just just a really good example of kind of I guess sucking the reader in with all these beautiful things, and then, oh, actually cancer can still happen here among all these beautiful things. Also, a bit of a last minute addition to this presentation, I put in "Pain has an element of blank" by Emily Dickinson. So pain has an element of blank. It cannot recollect when it began, or if there were a day when it was not. It has no future but itself. Its infinite realms contain its past, enlightened to perceive new periods of pain. It's a nice short one. I have a short attention span. But yeah, I really wanted to put this in as an example of writing directly about a symptom or an illness, so pain. And I think that she describes it really well. And when you're in pain, it can be difficult to remember a time when you weren't, a time from before it happened. I think she gets that across really well in this such a short space too. And also how there is personification of pain as well. It cannot recollect, as if it's a person who could remember for itself, not I can't recollect, it itself cannot recollect. So those are my examples then. So let's talk about poetic form. So I've talked a little bit already about free verse and how it can really allow you to do basically anything you want in terms of layout and stanza and all sorts. So I won't say too much more on free verse, and this is really just put a couple of examples here to get you thinking about the kinds of things that you might want to do. How might you want to write about things? So I have a friend who is really good at rhyming poetry. I don't think that I'm it's not really my forte. I prefer to not rhyme, but when a poem, when there aren't too many obvious rhymes, and the meter is good, I think it can work fabulously. I do have a friend who does rhyming poetry really well. It's just interesting to think about how rhyming changes the tone of a poem. So maybe you make a poem rhyme, it might make it sound a little bit lighter. And how does that gel with the topic that you're writing about, or the tone or the words you're using? You know, maybe you are writing a lighter poem, or maybe you want it to be more satirical. So how does rhyming affect it? And maybe you can experiment rhyming and not rhyming, and see what effect that has. I put a haiku in there, which is just a three-line poem. The first line is 5 syllables long. The second one is 7, and the third one is 5 again. It doesn't rhyme. It's very easy to write a haiku. It's very difficult to do it well. You know, you can, of course, you could just bash one out. You say, oh yeah, that's this fits the requirements for the syllables, job done. But actually there is a lot more to it. I believe that they're supposed to be quite observational. There is a lot more that you can read around about haiku to make sure you're doing an authentic, you know, something that just is done really well. Sonnets you might want to have a look at, or villanelles. Villanelles are great fun, actually. I do enjoy writing a villanelle, because it is just a few lines repeated in this, but there's certain places where you need to repeat them, but it does give you quite a nice effect. And then prose poetry and lyric essays. So I spoke briefly before about that world in between. This is definitely a poem because I can see that it's formatted, you know, it's quite narrow, maybe it rhymes, maybe it's in a particular form, and then prose, which is, you know, just, you know, paragraphs. There is space in between there for prose poetry or lyric essays, which are kind of similar things, really. So prose poetry, thinking that maybe something that looks like prose but sounds or feels poetic. And then lyric essays I've just started to have a look into as part of my research, and they come in a lot of forms, and a lot of people seem to have different ideas about what a lyric essay is. John DeGata is a very good resource for learning about lyric essays, but essentially it's prose, but there might be sort of maybe a mixture of poetry in there as well, and it's kind of a rumination of different things that doesn't necessarily come to any conclusion, but also weaves together disparate things that, you know, might not necessarily otherwise be connected. So yes, that's a really interesting thing to look into. And I'm really finding myself becoming an advocate for, you know, just writing what you need to write and not worrying too much about form, you know, just getting all the words out there, and then looking later and thinking, okay, does this want to be a poem? Does it want to be prose? What is it? I've written poems before and looked at them and been like, this doesn't want to be a poem. I've written it that way, but I shouldn't have. It's wrong. I need to reformat it, rejig it a bit to make it into a prose piece, because that's just what fits these words and this tone. Is just what works better. So I fully recommend just, you know, holding yourself open to all the different possibilities for form. And yeah, and thinking what form would best help you to tell the particular story or convey this feeling. So what to write about then? That's the big question. So you could write about the big aspects or the small aspects of your experience. So your experience as a whole, the entire thing, like an overall feeling. Or maybe you want to, you know, write a plotted sort of summary from beginning to end, but kind of do it in a poetic way. Maybe there's an overarching theme that kept cropping up about your experience and you just want to focus on that or a particular angle, you know, or about your body, or about friendship or relationships, or your relationships with the medical team perhaps, or your body, your symptoms of, gosh, there's all sorts of feelings. There's just so much that you could do, or really small aspects of your experience, like really small details, like what was the view like out of your hospital window, a conversation that you had with somebody once, somebody said something stupid to you about your experience, those small details, and things that are unique to you. What would you not see in other people's experiences? What surprised you? What was the hardest thing, or the most comforting thing, or the most surprising thing about your experience? Or what has stuck in your mind and just won't go away? What memories keep coming back to you? What visions do you see? What do you dream about? What just won't go away? What do you feel that you need to write about? And even if you're writing about the thing as a whole, about something big, remember to hone in on those small details, because it's those things that will really bring images and life to your writing, and make it unique, and make people be able to see what you're showing them. Okay, how to get your poetry published then? So there's lots of different avenues for getting published. So you've got big and small, tiny and massive literary magazines. You've got poetry collections, anthologies, pamphlets. You've got your, like, you can sort of contribute to anthologies with one poem with lots of other different authors, or try and get your own collection published. You can enter competitions, you can get an agent and get their help with getting published. You can look at self-publishing, you can look at sharing your writing through blogging. So there's an awful lot that you could do, which really stretches beyond what my goal was as a kid, which was to be a writer. So therefore I'm going to write a novel, because firstly I didn't know really about other opportunities like literary magazines when I was a kid, so it wouldn't have even occurred to me, and then secondly, a lot of these opportunities didn't exist back then, you know, things like blogging. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about how we have these ideas of what success or getting published or anything else, what that looks like when we're younger, and how that can expand when we realize that there are more opportunities. So really it's all about thinking about what you really want to get out of it. What do you want to do? What would feel successful to you? What would be an achievement? Who do you want to see your writing? Where do you want to see it? Who do you want to publish it? So we'll talk about literary magazines briefly, because I'm the editor of my own literary magazine, Peking Cat. We're very small, been going for a few years now. We're online currently, so we post poems on the website, and also in a yearly print anthology. We did used to do magazines like every month, so our format has changed quite a few times over the last few years, but there's so many literary magazines. There's literally thousands of opportunities. It's just, do you want to be published in you know, a niche small indie lit mag? Do you want to be published in the New Yorker? You know, there's lots of different ways of going about it, and sometimes I find as well that the online publications, so things like blogs, for example, can sometimes respond quicker, and you can potentially sometimes get published quicker as well if you're targeting those. Some of them have like only a few days or a couple of weeks in terms of time of getting back to you. Whereas if you're looking at like a really big famous lit mag, then you're looking at like 6 months, a year, until you have a response. So a really useful tool that I use is Duotrope, and it's a database of literary magazines and agents as well, actually, and publications. You do have to pay for it. I think it's about $50 a year or something, so it's not loads. I think it's about £30 a month, a year. And I found it really, really useful. I do pay for it every year. It tells you all sorts of things about the publishers. It tells you on average how long they take to respond, whether or not they're even open for submissions. You can change the you filter your results and sort your results by how likely, like how approachable they are, so how likely they are to accept your writing. So what's the percentage of pieces of work that get accepted into the publication, as I say, how long they take to respond. It's just an incredibly useful tool. But there are also free databases as well, like pw.org has a free database. You can't filter it as much as you can with Duotrope, but it's still definitely a great starting point. Also social media, so Twitter, you'll find loads of lit mags if you have a little search, and see whether they're open or not. So some tips for submitting to literary magazines. If that's something that you want to do, keep a record of where you've submitted to. I have a spreadsheet of everything that I've ever submitted to anybody, because that can help you keep track, so that you don't send something to somebody when they're already considering a piece, because that's a good way to get ignored, or to annoy editors a little bit, is to send something, not wait until you had a reply, and then also send something else, and then maybe something else as well. So keeping a record will help you to keep track of all of that. What else was I going to say? Always read the submission guidelines, and always try, if you can, to have a look at the things that they've previously published and see if your writing fits in with them. Publishing is a lot like dating. You could throw out a poem that's really great and somebody else loves, but get rejected from a different literary magazine because they're just not that into it, or also because they receive so many really great pieces, and they can only print so many, so they end up rejecting pieces that are really good. So being rejected is not a reflection on your work. Do keep trying, keep putting your pieces out there, and just be persistent. Make sure you're following the submission guidelines. They'll tell you how many pieces they want you to send, what type of things that they accept in terms of form and general style. Some of them are really, really prescriptive, and they want you to submit in a particular font, or they want you to use a particular subject line when you email them. Some of them will want you to submit through their submissions platform, like Submittable, for example. So just make sure you follow the guidelines. Is the best course of action. So poetry collections and pamphlets then are an option. Some publishers, you find these small indie press publishers who might publish some short pamphlets. So pamphlets are kind of definitely less than 40 pages, like maybe 10 or 20 pages even. And then poetry or chapbooks as well. I think chapbooks are probably the same, around like the 40-page mark. And then collections, like your full length kind of 60 plus range of pages or poems. And again, there's you can find opportunities for those on Duotrope and on social media, or by Googling, I guess. You can also find opportunities for competitions, but just be aware, because some of them you might need to pay an entry fee for. You can also look at getting an agent. I'm not going to talk about that too much because I don't have one, so I don't have too much experience of looking for one, but again, same thing applies. Look online, look at what they've done before. You know, submission guidelines really important. Yeah, and then through them, then you could potentially get published with a publisher for your poetry collections or chapbooks and pamphlets. Again, just be aware of paying markets. So paying market is market that will pay you, obviously. So some lit mags do pay for poems, lots of them don't. So just check depending on what you want to do. Yeah, so lots of them are non-paying markets, and some of them do have entry fees. So if they are a paying market, then there is a chance that they might also require an entry fee, because that's sometimes how they are able to pay authors, is because everybody pays a submission fee. There's also the opportunity for self-publishing. So you could self-publish a book. I've self-published before using lulu.com, and also Amazon with Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, is how I published my memoir. You might want to look into getting an editor if you go down that route. And yeah, self-publishing is just a whole other topic, really. And then there's blogging as well. If you wanted to start your own website to showcase your poetry, then, you know, absolutely nothing's stopping you from firing up WordPress or blogger.com or whatever, or even Tumblr or Medium, or anywhere else, and just yeah, starting to get your poetry out there by putting it on your own website, if that's something you want to do. So yeah, there's lots of options there, and it really just depends. You know, if you want to be published by somebody else, if you want your whole collection published, or just one poem in a lit mag, or, you know, because lit mags will accept one, or they might accept your entire submission, depending. Yeah, and if you want to be submitting to paying or non-paying markets, whether you're willing to pay entry fees or not. So yeah, so there's lots to think about, but lots of great opportunities. So yeah, definitely keep Duotrope and some of the other publisher databases in mind for that. So that's pretty much it then for my slides. At this point, I would normally take questions, but since we're not live, I do encourage you to get in touch with me. My DMs are always open on Twitter. You can get me at Writer Sam R on Twitter and Facebook, or Peking Cat Lit or Peking Cat Literary on Twitter and Facebook. Either is good. And the Peking Cat Literary website is there, pekingcatliterary.co.uk, or you can email me, sam@pekingcatliterary.co.uk. I haven't put my personal website on there, but that is writersam.co.uk. So there's so many ways you can get in touch with me. If you want to ask me any questions about anything that I've talked about here, or yeah, just say hi, just let me know what you think of the video. I hope it's been really useful for you. Yeah, so let me stop sharing, and I will hopefully see you very soon. Take care.